Translating for Impact, a toolkit to apply the translational science benefits model to your work. And we're so excited to have Stephanie Andersen lead this session for us today, with Dr. Doug Luke participating as well in the Q&A portion. Ms. Andersen is the Manager of Research Translation at the Center for Public Health System Science at Washington University in St. Louis, and she oversees the Translational Science Benefits Model project, making her the perfect person to help us apply this toolkit here today and to walk us through that process. As you heard from Dr. Luke this morning, that model is designed to help scientists demonstrate the impact of their research on downstream public health, clinical, and societal benefits. Without further ado, I give you Stephanie Andersen.
Thank you so much, Amy. And I'm just going to get my slides going here. Hopefully all of you can now see them, and I'm excited to kind of keep the TSBM and impact conversation going today. Hopefully most or all of you were able to catch Doug's talk this morning about our model and kind of impact more broadly. And then what I'm going to do today is go into a little bit more detail about our new Translating for Impact toolkit, and also talk a little bit about a recent collaboration that we did using the toolkit to develop some impact case studies and impact profiles, which are two tools that we encourage researchers to use to talk about their impact. You can kind of see how that worked out in real life. Okay, so I won't spend a lot of time on the model, but in case you didn't see Doug's talk, I just wanted to kind of give a quick overview and talk a little bit about what the TSBM is. So it really is, trying to kind of think about the question, how does scientific research lead to things that actually improve the world around us? And the way we see it is that translational science benefits are really kind of at the end of this translational pipeline that moves science from research to impact. And a lot of times we measure success in terms of just this first translational activity that you can see pictured here in the gray bar, things like we wrote a paper or we did a conference presentation. But the second translational activity is really important, and that has to happen for science to actually get out into our communities and our healthcare systems. And so when we started to think about the question of defining and measuring impact, we discovered that there were lots of ways to do this. There were hundreds of different ways that people were demonstrating impact, and there really wasn't a single framework to tie it all together. So the TSBM is really designed to kind of fill this gap by offering a new approach for demonstrating the impact of science in the broader community. And we have divided out the benefits into kind of four big buckets: clinical, community, policy, and economic benefits. And these are designed to be kind of tangible benefits that are meaningful for lay audiences. Things like I developed a new drug, or I passed a policy, or I helped improve healthcare delivery. And the TSBM has really grown rapidly over the last few years, and we've been so amazed at the interest in the model and the growth in using it. And one thing we hear a lot is kind of, okay, this sounds great. What do I do now? And how do I apply this to my work and help me get started? And so to answer those requests and questions, we developed our Translating for Impact toolkit. And it includes 9 tools to help integrate impact throughout the research process by planning for, tracking, and demonstrating the impact of your work. And the toolkit can be used by researchers at any stage in their career to describe either a single project or a body of work. It could also be used by a program or center to describe the work of a larger initiative or their whole center. So today I'm going to walk through the toolkit, and then I'll talk a little bit about one of our recent collaborations. So the toolkit starts with the plan stage, and in this step, we have 4 tools, and they're really designed to help you start with the TSBM just by identifying your benefits, and then planning the activities and people that you will need to achieve them. The first tool in the toolkit is the roadmap to impact. And Doug talked a little bit about this in his talk as well, because it's in our minds, the really foundational tool of the toolkit. It's the one that we want to see, every project using. And the reason for that is because it helps you to really kind of see the big picture of how you can integrate impact throughout your research and begin to identify those translational benefits of your work, and just kind of have a plan that then you can refer back to. We would recommend that you develop this with your team. So like 4 to 8 people is a good number, but just not doing this on your own and kind of bringing in multiple perspectives. And you can see here that the last box on here in the bottom corner is potential benefits. So that's where you, after you sort of get answers to these bigger questions, you can kind of then start to link it to the benefits in the model itself. And then the next tool builds off of that, which is our benefits 2x2. This is designed to help you identify your benefits and when they might be realized, and then just prioritize the ones that might be most realistic. So there are lots of things that you could maybe achieve someday, but this will help you set some parameters kind of on what's most feasible, when will those happen, and that's going to be different for every project. But those are really important to help you develop a plan to kind of track your progress towards actually achieving your benefits. The next tool in our toolkit is called the Stakeholder Mapper, and this helps to identify champions or roadblocks to your work and sort of plot your partners according to interest and influence in your project, so that you can then think about, who do I need to engage with and keep involved in my project, and who can I, not communicate with as frequently, and how do I engage these different partners? And so we also include some concrete steps to create an engagement plan for those individuals to kind of help you progress towards impact. One thing I want to acknowledge on this tool is, I think we're continuing to learn and adapt our toolkit all the time. This is a really new toolkit that we've just launched, and I think I even learned a lot today in the talk right before this one about the use of the word stakeholder, and I think it's something that we would really love to consider, including more inclusive language here in our tool as well. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and say, I found that to be really compelling, and I think it's something we should be thinking about for TSBM more broadly in not using the term stakeholder. So I appreciated learning a little bit myself during the presentations today. And the last tool in this section is our Team Manager tool. And it is really designed to help you think about your internal team. So the people in your research group or in your staff, and think about the skills and expertise that they have, and how will that actually help you achieve impact, and what gaps in their skills do you have that you need to fill to get to impact. We also have a piece in this tool on forming a diverse team that's committed to equity and inclusion, and what those different aspects of diversity might look like for your team, and how can you think about filling your gaps thoughtfully with that goal in mind as well. So that's one of our tools in that step. And then we move to the track phase of our toolkit, which includes our impact tracker tool. And this tool is designed to help you monitor progress towards your indicators of impact. And it helps you to keep track of broader impacts, track milestones towards them. Then you have kind of a ready-made report for funders or other partners that you can share and say, here's what we've done so far. This is also a really nice setup for like our later tools when you want to actually talk about your impact, because you have everything right here in one place. And the impact tracker is actually an Excel spreadsheet tool. So all of our other tools are PDF fillable forms right now. We're hoping to move everything to more of a web-based tool where you kind of log in and use interactive tools. But for now, they're PDFs, and this one is an Excel spreadsheet because we really wanted you to be able to continually update it as your project is moving along. In the demonstrate step, we have 4 tools, starting with the product Navigator. And all of these tools in this step are about communication and dissemination. They're really about how do you talk about impact to your different audiences. And the product Navigator is a good place to start if you don't know the answer to that question and you're kind of stuck on, how am I even going to talk about this? What am I trying to, get out of this communication? So it has this great decision tree in it, which kind of leads you through the steps of thinking about what is my goal? What are my audiences in sharing this impact information? And then it will kind of help you decide which kind of a tool you might want to use. So maybe it is that you need a progress report for your funder, or maybe it's that you do want to write an academic paper, but we've also included some other types of dissemination products like our case study and impact profile. And our case studies are available on our websites. You can go and look at them. We have almost 20 case studies now. So this is one of the products that we created for TSBM that we would really encourage folks to think about using, because as Doug talked a little bit about this morning, it kind of tells the story of impact. We have a tool to help develop this called our case study builder that I'll show you in a minute, but I just wanted to highlight kind of what the end product looks like here. And it's kind of gives you a summary of the significance of the impact in the field and in the community, and then talks about the TSBM benefits that are associated with the project. And you can see here, this one is a more clinical research project. We also have case studies on public health research projects. We also have case studies that are in various phases of development. So this one is an example from a project that's a little bit earlier in its development, and they have had some success and some impacts have been achieved, but they still have lots more that they plan to do, and they're kind of earlier in their work. So you can see here in the benefits side, benefits column, there's a note that says whether the benefit is demonstrated or potential. And so they're able to kind of document the impacts they anticipate achieving and monitor their progress towards them, but they may not have achieved those yet. And I think for a lot of our early projects that we've worked with, this has been really helpful because they've kind of developed that impact language early in their projects. So this is the case study builder tool. It is a PDF fillable form tool like our others, and it gives you all the information that you need to develop that case study, just like I showed you. After you fill it out, you have all the pieces right there ready to make a case study and kind of talk about your benefits in more detail than you would if you were just like picking them off the TSBM checklist per se. And then we also have another product that I mentioned briefly, which is our impact profile. And the impact profile is, it's actually a PowerPoint template, and we have a fillable form as well if you prefer to use that. But it's really a shorter project that's designed to summarize your impact in about half as many words as the case study. So there may be audiences that just don't have the time or interest in reading your whole case study. And the impact profile is like a great one-pager. It's very succinct for them. Now, you do not have to be like a graphic design guru to do this, because we have given you the PowerPoint template so you can put your information in and it'll come out looking just like this. And then, if you do develop the case study, this is a great tool to layer that dissemination. And then the last tool in our toolkit is the Dissemination Planner. In this tool, you know what kind of products you're making, and this is where you can really create a plan to share them. Some of the things that were touched on in our networking lunch talk today about how to disseminate your work and get yourself noticed. This is a place where you can record those decisions and kind of make a plan. How am I going to share? What channels am I going to use? How will I measure success? When will I share different things? And then, as I mentioned, we recently had some researchers try using some of the tools in our toolkit to develop their own dissemination products and their own case studies. We worked with Enola Proctor's Implementation Research Institute here at Washington University in St. Louis to develop case studies of the work of their most recent cohort. And we developed 6 impact case studies demonstrating how implementation science can improve health services and change communities. And you can see the 6 stories that are featured here. You can read the full case studies on our website. But what I wanted to point out in particular is that we did two other things with this that I think are really helpful. One, we made impact profiles for all of these projects. So now they have the full impact case study, and they have this shorter product that they can use to share with funders or other partners as a quick summary of their research projects and really highlighting their key impacts. And then we also, and here's one that we did for Lisa Saldana's group at Families Actively Improving Relationships, or the FAIR project. And then we also did a summary document for IRI to kind of look at the impact of these projects overall, and what is the impact of IRI as a mentored network that they have been able to help these projects achieve these benefits or plan to in the future. So you can see here that overall they achieved 40 benefits, or plan to, I should say. So many of these are still in the potential phase because these projects are very early on. A lot of them, a couple of them have just begun. Others have some demonstrated impacts already. But there is a mix, and you can kind of get a sense of IRI's larger impact. You know, they have a large impact in the community domain, but they also have impacts in policy areas and also economic and clinical impacts as well. So if you're interested in using the toolkit, it is available online, and you can go to our website, translationalsciencebenefits.wustl.edu, to get started. We would really recommend you start with that roadmap to impact first, and then just choose those additional tools based on your research phase and your goals. You may not need all 9 tools, that's a lot, and you can definitely pick and choose the ones that make the most sense to you and would be the most useful. We are also planning to pilot test this more formally over the next year, and we would love to get involved with research groups or researchers who'd be interested in trying out the tools, applying them to their work. And so if that's something you'd be interested in, then definitely let us know that too. And this is my contact info if you want to reach out to me, or you can visit our website as well. Thank you.
Excellent presentation, Stephanie. Thank you so very much. We certainly welcome additional questions or comments in the chat. Russ had a comment that he really appreciates the case studies and the case study builders and could really help make the TSBM more tangible and improve application. Stephanie, I don't know if you can see the chat very well. Maybe you can leave up your contact info for another moment or so, or perhaps even copy and put any of that into the chat and then put the slides down so it's a little easier for you to track on the chat.
Okay. Yeah, let me do that.
And I have one question for you. I'll take the moderator privilege while we're waiting for others. So I seconded Russ's point that this is really helpful, and for many of our stakeholders, as many of our invested partners, as others have said, they appreciate having things quick and easy to digest, something that's just in one page. I'm wondering if you would have you found so far that even having different impact profiles that are segmented to different audience types might be useful, or if it's seemed like a single one pager can be applicable for different audiences, such as community audience, clinical audiences, policymakers. Do you have any thoughts or comments on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And it's probably, the answer is probably like, it depends. But what, on the one hand, we really did want to create an impact profile that you could repurpose and reuse, because it's, I think one of the things that we see most often is that researchers are tight on time for dissemination, and this isn't necessarily a priority or a funding possibility for them to do a lot of this work. So we want to make it easy. So I don't think you need to create one for every new audience. That's not to say you certainly couldn't do that if it felt like there was an audience that you needed to do that for. So 2 things. One, we have started to adapt this impact profile for promotion and tenure decisions to kind of be a more researcher focused profile rather than focused on one project. So that's maybe one other way to use it. And we are developing a template that is specific to a researcher profile. We are also in our product navigator, recommend a policy brief as a product. And I think that's something that we could think about developing examples or templates of that down the road. We haven't done that yet, but I think the policy audience in particular needs different information. And the impact profile is a good option for them, but it may also be that there is actually a policy brief tool that would be more useful.
I think that's a great point. I know certain professional organizations have worked to try to make policy briefs and, had certain standard, pieces of information in those. I love the notion that that might be a particular audience for whom a different one pager could be useful.
On that note, Amy, I think what Steph shared was this sort of understanding that it almost couldn't be too brief, meaning that we thought the case studies were already pretty brief, but they said you can do better. And it actually, I have a good friend and colleague who runs a different center. I won't mention his name, but they do policy, they do research briefs for a policy audience. And I remember seeing one of his, and it was 12 pages plus 2 pages of citations. And at least I knew our briefs were briefer than that. But I do think looking at this, it's always, anytime we spent focusing on who our audience is, we've always benefited from that. And so I really like the idea of thinking through, are there materials that really are better for others? But, linking it to one other question or comment that I saw in chat, which is around the case study template. When people were first putting their case studies together, our problem has been, it's hard for us to do case studies of other people's work. We don't understand it, it's outside of our area. And yet when we ask them to start, that also tends to produce really long briefs that often have big parts of methods and results sections that are just copied over. And we haven't, I think the template is a really, really good step forward, but we're still trying to figure out the best way. You really need people who are experienced with communications to put together effective translational documents like this. They need to be at least part of the process.
Yeah. And I see here a question from Russ about how to talk about the TSBM in the most briefest way. Do we have any resources for that? And we do. And I think like one thing in particular that we've created for this conference is the handout that goes with this concurrent session. So it like really briefly covers the TSBM and the toolkit. So that's something you can use. We also have our video that Doug showed in his plenary session, which I think is great. And then we have a couple of other videos that we've done. They're not as like fancy professional. They're us sharing and talking more about the TSBM, but they're also brief, and we'd be happy to share those, I think, if that would be helpful. And they kind of cover a couple of different things, like the one is on the TSBM itself and one is on the toolkit, for example.
That's great. I wonder, while we're waiting for any other comments in the chat too, thinking about who is going through the process of writing up this case study template and kind of whose voice is heard or whose voice is coming through. Have you do you have any advice, or have you piloted using other invested partners along with research team members to help develop these vignettes to sort of avoid maybe a one-sided voice coming through? Any thoughts or comments there?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and one that we would really like to do in the pilot testing. Right now, what I see most is that, when people work with us to develop a case study or develop their own, they either involve their larger team ahead of time before they get to talking to us, or we encourage them to go back and share it with the draft with their teams and with their partners. So we're trying to encourage that, but I think, thinking about how to share the builder and how to involve community partners in actually completing the tools is something we're really interested in as we look towards how we can use the tools in the future. now that they're kind of out and available. So we haven't had as many people be able to test them out yet, but I think that's really interesting question.
The other thing that's been interesting about that is learning how other communication leaders in research settings view this. We wanted to do this to enhance the visibility of the clinical and translational work. And one little piece is, it turned out we were one of the first groups to suggest that pictures of people other than the PI should be featured in these case studies. And the PI, often who looked like me. And it was interesting. It wasn't so much that there was a policy against it. It just wasn't the way they did things. And so, having pictures of groups of people, or having pictures of students who are involved in the research, or having pictures of community partners, all required a little more work because it just didn't fit into the traditional way of marketing these research results. Do you mind, Amy, do you mind? I wanted to respond to one thing from Russ, and maybe actually ask the group. I know we have a lot of participants being quiet. Russ thought that maybe people would be interested in how this might apply to promotion and tenure. I'm guessing there's a lot of people on this call who will do that at some point, or have done it at some point in their careers. And I'd love to hear questions about this, but I'll just say one thing in terms of this work. We are developing what will probably be not as complicated a set of tools as what Steph just shared, but some templates for like faculty and research research staff who, if they want to incorporate an impact profile in their materials, to give them some guidance on that. And I'd love to hear if people have any suggestions about that, or if they just have any questions about how do you even start telling an impact story in this kind of setting, in your promotion and tenure documents, for example. Anybody want to be brave?
And while people are thinking, but feel free to speak up and unmute yourself if you want to. I'll just add to that too, that, one thing that we put in the impact profile that was specifically raised about promotion and tenure is that, there's this need to talk about more quantitative metrics of impact too, in addition to the narrative, like the case study is to narrative. And so, we have a feature box in the impact profile where you can highlight some of those key quantitative metrics or numbers or impact that might be something that you could like pull out and highlight. But I think it's a nice marriage between the story of your impact and those quantitative metrics, which are also important. But as we've shared today, we think there's an important role for telling the kind of narrative impact story. So we're trying to really do both, but I think that was a piece that was noted for promotion and tenure in particular as being important.
And one thing that, so Stanley had a suggestion, which is, I think exactly right, that typically, I think you would have your your productivity and the visibility of your work, and you'd have the traditional summaries. And then near the end, you could basically tell the story of how your research is sort of getting out there, if you will. But in addition to whatever tools we might develop, and of course we'll share them, it's so context dependent in terms of your own academic setting. And there really has to be guidance, and I would say permission to include that. I mean, there are places where we slide it in because in fact, people get excited to hear that your research is having real world impact. But I know other institutions that there's just no ability to tell that story. So we're getting more application of discovery. Oh, that's a great, yeah, we may reach out to some of you to get some ideas. Yeah, Danielle, and I don't know if this is what you were implying, but you know, I mentioned this morning that when you're talking about impact, it's over a very different sort of time horizon. And you don't, and this is only one of the reasons that we started really emphasizing the role of potential impact. And for junior, you know, for junior scholars, you've got to be careful. You can't say your work is going to like result in a new set of, you know, policies by the time you go up for tenure. But being able to, even at the assistant professor level, being able to tell that story, I think is a way to communicate why your work is important to your colleagues, to, you know, help people mentor you in terms of directing you towards different kinds of funding support and other kinds of supports and so on. So.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, I was just thinking about it because I recently was promoted to assistant professor. And so I'm asking my department, you know, what is expected of me for tenure? And I want details. I want to know what is being asked of me so I can set myself up for success. And I still have yet to have that meeting, but I don't think that anything like this will be included in there. I think most of our department is still focused on the traditional metrics of grants and publications, but we'll see.
And hopefully you'll get a more useful answer to your question than what we often get here, which is what's expected of you? Everything.
Yeah, I hope I don't get that answer.
Oh, that's great. I'm clicking on that now.
Yeah, it has you download a document, and then within the document, it lists the scholarship of discovery and scholarship of integration. So at least that gives you an example here at University of Colorado.
Does, taking advantage of being with you all, does the scholarship of integration also include like some team science principles in there as well, like collaboration? And
Stan might know better than me, but I'm just going off the very brief Roman numeral outline that it has listed in there. It does talk about connections across disciplines, which seems relevant to team science.
Great.
Yeah, Amy, this is Stan. They just had some discussions over the last year, and that's an area that needed attention, and the school is addressing it in policy and putting more, I don't want to say emphasis, but bringing to light the importance of team science. You know, that affects people like biostatisticians, analysts that are an important part of the team, but may not be a first author on a paper. So it's coming into light, at least here.
This has been a great session. We're at the 2-minute warning mark. So I don't know, Stephanie, if you want to think about any last words you want to share with us, or anything else you saw you wanted to reflect upon as we're drawing to a close.
No, I think just thank you for letting us share about TSBM this morning and today. And you know, we hope you all will reach out and let us know if you have any more questions or interested in using the tools. It's just, I think, going to be so valuable for us to get to kind of try them out with people who are actually out there kind of doing research and work, and put them to the test. So that's kind of our focus for the future. And thanks for letting us be here.
Yes, thank you all. This has been great.
Absolutely. And Stephanie, thanks for putting your email in the chat and for your comment that if people were interested in pilot testing certain things. I think I heard the case study builder. Was there anything else, and you want to put a last plug in for that you'd like?
Yeah, I think we're planning to test all of the tools. And I think in particular, the roadmap to impact is one that we hope to test and develop some trainings and workshops around soon. So I think that's a great one to start with as well.
Great. So definitely check out, Stephanie's got the link in there, and she's also got her email address if you're interested in pilot testing the roadmap, and working with her on that. Sounds like she'd be interested in you reaching out. Is that right, Stephanie? Catching that right? Perfect. All right, well, thanks everyone. And we're gonna have just a brief 5-minute break here before Drs. Glasgow and Fort will take over for their session at 2:40. And our learning times folks, can you confirm that we will be staying on this link for those who are hanging on for that next session?
Yes, I can confirm that you can just stay in the room and hang out here for the next.
Wonderful. So 5-minute bio break, everyone, and see those of you back in 5 who are here for Dr. Glasgow's and Dr. Fort's session.